What if the single most powerful wealth-building tool you possess isn't your paycheck, your investment account, or even your education? What if it's something far more fragile? Something that's being quietly stolen from you every single morning before you've even poured your first cup of coffee. Right now, while you're reading this, there are individuals in this country sitting in near-empty offices, reading dusty books, scheduling almost nothing, saying no to nearly everything, and in doing so, quietly accumulating more generational wealth than entire cities will ever see. They are not working harder than you. In fact, by every traditional measure, they appear to be doing almost nothing at all. And that's precisely the secret. The global economic system was not built to set you free. It was engineered deliberately, surgically, and profitably to keep your brain so overwhelmed, so exhausted, and so distracted that you never have the mental energy left to question the rules of the game you're trapped in. This is the story of that system. And more importantly, this is the blueprint for escaping it. What you're about to hear will make you uncomfortable. It should, because the truth about wealth in America has never been about how hard you grind. It has always been about how ruthlessly you protect your mind. Picture someone who has built one of the most extraordinary financial track records in the history of American capitalism. Someone whose portfolio decisions have shaped entire industries, whose judgment on capital allocation is studied in business schools across the country. Now picture what their average Tuesday actually looks like. No crowded conference rooms, no barked orders, no wall of screens flashing real-time data. Just a man in a modest office, a stack of books, a notepad, hours and hours of near-total silence. For most Americans, this image triggers a subtle but deeply ingrained confusion. We've been conditioned, from elementary school straight through corporate orientation, to believe that output is directly proportional to visible effort, that the harder you hustle, the more valuable you become, that a packed schedule equals a successful life. This conditioning is not accidental. It is one of the most economically profitable myths ever manufactured. Think about how deeply it runs. Parents tell their children to work hard and stay busy. Teachers grade students on participation and output. Employers reward those who reply to emails fastest, stay latest, and sacrifice the most personal time. The cultural celebration of the grind is everywhere. In social media captions, in motivational posters, in the language of every performance review ever written. We have collectively agreed to treat exhaustion as a virtue. And here's the truly dark part. The corporations that benefit from your exhaustion design this agreement. Your employer does not pay your salary out of generosity. They pay it because they are purchasing something extraordinarily valuable, the full, undivided processing power of your brain, for 8 to 10 hours every single day. They need you to arrive fully charged, burn everything you have in service of their goals, and leave completely empty. A worker with nothing left in the tank is a controllable worker. A worker with a depleted mind does not write a business plan on Thursday evening. They order takeout, queue up a streaming service, and collapse until the alarm forces them to begin the extraction cycle all over again. Here is the uncomfortable arithmetic they never teach in business school. The very behaviors that make you an exceptional employee make you a terrible capitalist. The 80-hour workweek doesn't just cost you time. It costs you the one resource that cannot be replenished by sleeping in on Saturday. It costs you the cognitive bandwidth to think clearly, independently, and far enough into the future to make decisions that actually change your financial trajectory. Busy is not successful. Busy is the oldest trick in the system's playbook. And until you see that clearly, you will keep running, faster and faster, generating more and more heat, on a wheel that was never designed to take you anywhere. Let's talk about something that neuroscience has confirmed, but that the corporate world desperately hopes you'll ignore. Your ability to think well is a finite, depletable resource. Not a motivational concept. Not a soft skill. A literal, biochemical reality. Every morning, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational decision-making, long-term planning, emotional regulation, and complex analysis, wakes up with a full charge. Let's call that charge 100% cognitive bandwidth. It is the mental fuel you need to recognize opportunity, calculate risk, override fear, and make the kind of high-leverage decisions that actually compound your net worth over decades. The tragedy is what happens to that charge before most Americans even sit down at their desks. Alarm goes off. Phone gets checked. 30 notifications from last night flood the screen. News alerts, social media pings, a passive-aggressive email from a colleague. Battery drops to 90% before the feet hit the floor. Rushed breakfast, or no breakfast at all. Commute through stop-and-go traffic, absorbing the aggression of a highway full of equally depleted people. By the time the elevator opens onto the office floor, the battery is already sitting at 60 or 70%. Then the real drain begins. A 2-hour meeting that exists not to solve a problem, but to create the appearance of collaboration. A cascade of Slack notifications pulling focus from deep work into shallow reaction. A manager dropping an urgent project at 4:30 in the afternoon. 50 emails requiring 50 tiny decisions, none of which move the needle on anything that matters to your actual life. Every one of these interactions, every context switch, every interruption, every micro-conflict navigated with a forced professional smile, burns through your battery. By mid-afternoon, you're running on caffeine and cortisol. By evening, you're down to single digits. And this is the precise moment the system achieves its deepest victory. Because when your cognitive bandwidth is depleted, your brain doesn't shut down, it regresses. It abandons the prefrontal cortex entirely and hands control to the amygdala, the ancient, reactive, emotionally driven survival center. The amygdala does not build empires. The amygdala looks for immediate relief from pain. So the exhausted professional does exactly what an exhausted brain demands. They seek comfort. They seek numbness. They seek the fastest available dopamine hit. They don't build. They consume. And the financial industry, the entertainment industry, and the technology industry are perfectly positioned to profit from that consumption. From the impulsive brokerage trade, from the premium subscription service, from the targeted ad for a product that promises to fill the hollow feeling left by a day spent building someone else's dream. This is not weakness. This is biology being weaponized against you. The wealthy understood this equation long before the science caught up. The most effective capital allocators in American history didn't achieve extraordinary returns by working more hours than everyone else. They achieved extraordinary returns by protecting their cognitive bandwidth with an almost aggressive ruthlessness, so that when a genuine opportunity arrived, they had the mental resources to see it clearly, analyze it deeply, and act on it with total conviction. The bandwidth rule is simple. The quality of your financial decisions is not determined by how much information you consume. It is determined by how much processing power you have available when the decision actually matters. You cannot protect what you don't guard, and you cannot guard what you don't understand you're losing. Here's a fact that should stop you cold. The 5 most valuable corporations in America don't primarily sell products. They sell access to your nervous system. Their revenue is generated by holding your attention hostage long enough to monetize it. Through advertising, through behavioral data, through subscription fees extracted from habits so deeply embedded they feel like biological needs. These companies employ armies of the most gifted engineers and behavioral psychologists in the world. Their singular directive is to understand the architecture of the human brain well enough to bypass your rational decision-making and plug directly into your emotional reward system. They have spent decades and billions of dollars perfecting this bypass, and it is working with extraordinary precision. Consider what the average American investor's morning looks like today. Before a single word of genuine financial education has been consumed, before a single page of a balance sheet has been studied, they have already subjected themselves to an hour or more of carefully engineered financial anxiety. They check futures markets before breakfast. They absorb breaking news alerts designed not to inform, but to provoke. They listen to financial commentary on their commute, delivered by personalities whose entire professional incentive is to generate strong emotional reactions, not accurate analysis. They check their portfolio at 9. Check it again at noon. Refresh the page before bed. They believe this constant monitoring is a form of diligence. It is the opposite. Real investing is not a sport that rewards reactivity. It rewards patience, depth, and the rare ability to remain entirely unmoved while everyone around you loses their composure. Checking your portfolio 20 times a day doesn't give you an informational advantage. It gives you 20 additional opportunities to make a decision driven by fear or greed rather than analysis. This is the noise trap in its purest form. The financial media ecosystem survives by generating urgency. Every headline is engineered to feel like something you cannot afford to ignore. Every market movement is narrated as either a catastrophic warning or a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The goal is not to help you build wealth. It is to keep you engaged long enough for the advertising revenue to clear. But the noise trap extends far beyond financial media. Look at what passes for ambition in the modern corporate environment. The so-called high performer who responds to every Slack message within minutes, who stays late to perfect a presentation no one will remember, who schedules one-on-one meetings to manage upward, who monitors office dynamics like a chess player managing a board. This person is working incredibly hard. Their effort is genuine. Their sacrifice is real. But they are optimizing with furious precision for entirely the wrong outcome. They are climbing a ladder that has a defined ceiling. They are pouring 100% of their cognitive resources into a game that, by design, cannot produce the exponential returns they actually need to achieve financial freedom. They are so deep in the tactical weeds that they have completely lost the ability to step back and evaluate the strategic landscape. The noise trap accomplishes exactly this. It keeps you so thoroughly occupied with what is directly in front of you that you never develop the bandwidth to see what's waiting 50 miles ahead. The elite capital allocator does not participate in this system. They do not check prices daily. They do not consume news cycles. They do not optimize for inbox zero. They protect their distance from the noise with the same intensity that a surgeon protects the sterility of an operating field. Why? Because they understand that their edge, their only real, irreplaceable edge, is the ability to think more clearly, more patiently, and more independently than the market consensus. And that edge evaporates entirely the moment they allow themselves to be pulled into the noise. By deliberately disconnecting from the crowd, they do something that terrifies most people at a deeply psychological level. They stand alone. When everyone around you is panicking, the pull to panic with them is almost irresistible. When a stock you own is cratering and every financial commentator on television is announcing the end of the world, holding your position, or better yet, adding to it, requires a level of psychological fortitude that is simply impossible to maintain on a depleted cognitive battery. The noise is not neutral information. It is a weapon, and it is being used against your net worth every single day. The only defense is silence. Deliberate, protected, aggressively maintained silence. Every decade or so, the American financial system reaches a breaking point. It might be triggered by a real estate collapse, a global health emergency, a sovereign debt crisis, or the sudden, violent unwinding of a speculative bubble that had been building for years. The specific catalyst varies. The underlying dynamic never does. When a genuine market crisis hits, asset prices don't just decline, they fracture. Stocks that represented real businesses with real cash flows and decades of operating history get marked down 30, 40, 50% in a matter of weeks. Panic becomes contagious. Liquidity dries up. The financial media shifts into a register of pure catastrophism. Now watch what happens to the exhausted middle manager we've been discussing. He has been burning his cognitive bandwidth for years. He has been checking his portfolio every day, absorbing every piece of market noise, making small reactive decisions driven by emotion rather than analysis. His financial strategy has been reactive from the beginning, never deeply thought through, never grounded in a durable intellectual framework, always one market move away from being reconsidered. And now, in the span of 48 hours, half of his life savings has disappeared from his brokerage account. His amygdala registers this not as an abstract financial event, but as a physical threat to survival. Cortisol floods his system. Sleep becomes impossible. His concentration at work collapses. His relationships come under strain. He watches the news, which is reporting the situation as though civilization itself is unraveling, and his already depleted cognitive battery drops to zero. He cannot perform analysis. He cannot calculate intrinsic value. He cannot distinguish between a temporary price dislocation and a fundamental business collapse. His brain has been reduced to a single overwhelming imperative: make the pain stop. So he logs into his account at the very bottom of the market, and he sells. He doesn't sell because he has evaluated the situation rationally and concluded that selling is the optimal decision. He sells because selling is the only action available to him that will bring immediate psychological relief. He pays for that relief with his financial future. The market has accomplished something remarkable. It has successfully transferred his capital to someone else. And that someone else didn't lift a finger. They didn't work harder. They didn't sacrifice more. They simply had a full battery when he had an empty one. Now cut to a very different scene. Somewhere, in a modest office, in a quiet room, the investor with the protected bandwidth is watching the same market. They are sleeping 8 hours. Their calendar remains mostly empty. They are not consuming the panic being broadcast on financial television. Their cortisol levels are baseline. Their prefrontal cortex is fully online. They have spent years building a mental database of economic history, studying every major market crash of the last century, understanding the mechanics of how panics propagate, developing deep convictions about the intrinsic value of durable businesses. They are not surprised by what's happening. They have been waiting for it. What they see is not a catastrophe. What they see is the greatest asset liquidation sale in years. The same companies that were being priced at premium valuations 6 months ago, solid businesses with decades of operating history, genuine competitive advantages, and strong balance sheets, are now being offered at a fraction of their actual worth by terrified sellers who simply cannot endure another day of psychological pain. The rested investor picks up the phone. In a single afternoon, they deploy capital that the exhausted middle manager spent a decade accumulating, buying the assets the middle manager just sold, at prices that will look almost unbelievably cheap in 5 years. This is not luck. This is not genius. This is the direct, predictable, and mathematically inevitable result of one fundamental asymmetry: cognitive bandwidth at the moment of maximum opportunity. The market is not a casino. It is a transfer mechanism. It reliably moves capital from people who cannot manage their psychology under pressure to people who can. And the single greatest determinant of which category you fall into is not your income, your education, or your IQ. It is whether you have protected your mental energy well enough to remain rational when everyone around you has lost their minds. The fat pitch doesn't come every week. It doesn't even come every year. But when it does arrive, slow, obvious, right down the center of the strike zone, you either have the bandwidth to swing with total conviction, or you don't. There is no in-between. You may be listening to this and feeling a familiar frustration. The philosophy makes sense in the abstract. But you have a job. You have obligations. You have a boss who doesn't care about your cognitive bandwidth. You have a family, a commute, a mortgage payment, and approximately 0 hours in your week that feel genuinely free. Here's what I want you to understand. This is not a philosophy that requires billions of dollars, a personal assistant, or a private office in Nebraska. It scales perfectly to wherever you are right now. The bandwidth rule applies whether you have $500 or $500 million. What it requires is not money. What it requires is a series of deliberate, uncomfortable decisions about how you are currently choosing to spend the mental energy you do have, because you have more than you think. You're just not protecting it. Step 1 is what I call stopping the bleeding. You cannot charge a battery that has an open wound in it. Before you think about investing, before you think about building a side business, before you think about any kind of wealth accumulation, you need to do a ruthlessly honest audit of where your mental energy is currently leaking. Start with your mornings. The first 60 minutes of your day set the neurological tone for everything that follows. If you begin by flooding your brain with notifications, headlines, and other people's urgent demands, you have already surrendered the most valuable cognitive real estate you own. Guard that hour like it's the foundation of your financial future. Because it is. Look at your physical environment. Constant connectivity is not a professional advantage. It's a chronic stress delivery system. Every notification that interrupts a period of focused thinking costs you far more than the 30 seconds it takes to read and dismiss. The cognitive restart required after each interruption burns through your battery at a rate that the research on this topic describes as genuinely alarming. Look at your financial behaviors. If you are checking your investment accounts daily or multiple times daily, you are not being responsible. You are practicing a compulsive habit that generates anxiety without producing useful information. The price of a quality asset on a random Tuesday afternoon tells you almost nothing about its value. Stop looking. Step 2 is building what I call the bandwidth fund. Financial advisors tell you to build an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of expenses in a liquid account in case something unexpected happens. This is reasonable advice, but it addresses only the practical dimension of financial instability. Here's the deeper truth. Financial insecurity is not just a practical problem. It is a cognitive problem. When you are operating from a position of financial precarity, when one bad month could mean genuine crisis, your nervous system knows it. You make decisions differently under that kind of background stress. You say yes to things you should refuse. You take on projects you don't have bandwidth for. You tolerate conditions at work that a person with financial cushion would walk away from. The bandwidth fund is designed to purchase something more valuable than security. It purchases psychological leverage. When you have 12 months of living expenses sitting in a liquid account that you will not touch unless your back is genuinely against the wall, something shifts at a neurological level. Your baseline anxiety drops. Your decision-making improves. You begin to evaluate opportunities and obligations from a position of choice rather than desperation. That shift is not motivational language. It's a measurable change in the quality of judgment available to you. Step 3 is mastering the art of strategic refusal. The word no is the most undervalued tool in the vocabulary of anyone trying to build genuine wealth. Not passive-aggressive refusal. Not avoidant refusal. Strategic, deliberate, unapologetic refusal of anything that consumes cognitive bandwidth without producing a proportionate return. This means canceling the meeting that should have been an email. It means declining the social obligation that will leave you more drained than enriched. It means turning off the notifications that treat your attention as a commons anyone can graze. It means fundamentally accepting that other people will sometimes be annoyed by your boundaries and recognizing that their annoyance is not your emergency. Here's the social reality you need to prepare for. When you begin protecting your time and mental energy with intention, the people around you will notice. Some of them will admire it. Most of them will resist it. They will characterize your boundaries as aloofness, as arrogance, as lack of team spirit. This reaction is entirely predictable and entirely irrelevant. People who are unconsciously comfortable with their own cognitive depletion often feel destabilized by someone who refuses to participate in it. Your refusal to join the perpetual busyness performance is a quiet indictment of their own choices. Let them draw their own conclusions. Your bandwidth is not available for that conversation. Step 4 is the construction of the compounding machine. Once you have stopped the bleeding, built your psychological buffer, and established meaningful protection around your mental energy, you will experience something that may feel foreign at first. You will have genuine discretionary cognitive bandwidth, time and mental space that isn't immediately claimed by urgent demands, numbing entertainment, or the background hum of financial anxiety. This is the resource you have been too depleted to build with. Use it to develop a deep, patient, compounding relationship with genuine knowledge. Not news, not financial content designed to generate emotional reactions. Not the opinions of social media personalities who measure their credibility in follower counts. Study the fundamentals of how businesses actually generate value. Read the financial histories of companies across multiple economic cycles. Study the psychology of markets, how collective fear and collective greed operate, how they have operated consistently throughout history, and how they create the conditions for the kinds of asymmetric opportunities that actually change wealth trajectories. Read about industries you don't yet understand. Read biographies of capital allocators who built durable wealth across decades, not months. Study the mechanics of compounding with the same seriousness that a surgeon studies anatomy, because the mathematics of exponential growth, applied consistently over long enough time horizons, is the closest thing to a guaranteed formula for financial transformation that the real world offers. Every hour of genuine, deep study adds a layer to what the best investors describe as a mental model database, a foundational framework of pattern recognition that allows you, over time, to see through the noise of daily market movements to the underlying realities that actually determine long-term outcomes. Knowledge compounds exactly like capital. The accumulation is invisible at first. Then gradually it becomes undeniable. And eventually, it reaches a threshold where it begins to produce returns that have no relationship to the hours of labor you're physically putting in. That threshold is what escapes velocity actually feels like from the inside. Not a dramatic moment of triumph. Just a quiet morning when you realize that the machine you've been building slowly, patiently, with protected bandwidth and compounding knowledge, is generating more than you need without requiring you to surrender any more of your life to earn it. Step 5, and this may be the most psychologically demanding of all, is learning to be comfortable in the silence. Silence is where the real work happens, not the performative productivity of a packed schedule. The actual cognitive labor of sustained, focused thought. The kind of thinking that produces genuine insight, that connects patterns across disciplines, that generates the conviction necessary to act boldly when everyone else is paralyzed. For most Americans, extended silence is genuinely uncomfortable. We have been conditioned to fill every quiet moment with stimulation. We are surrounded by platforms explicitly designed to ensure that we never have to sit alone with our own thoughts for more than 90 seconds. But the capacity to think deeply in silence is not a personality trait. It is a skill, and like every skill, it develops with practice. Start small. An hour a day, completely disconnected from all screens and notifications, devoted entirely to reading, thinking, or writing. Not consuming entertainment. Not being productive in the conventional sense. Just thinking. What you will likely find at first is resistance. Your brain, accustomed to constant stimulation, will experience the absence of input as uncomfortable. You may feel antsy. You may feel guilty for not responding to something. You may feel like you're wasting time. You are not wasting time. You are rebuilding the most important infrastructure in your financial life. Over weeks and months, the discomfort fades. The quality of your thinking deepens. The noise of the outside world begins to recede into its proper proportion, not as a constant emergency demanding your immediate attention, but as background weather that you can acknowledge without being swept up in. And from that place of clarity, from a quiet room of your own construction, you begin to see things that the perpetually distracted simply cannot see. You see through the hysteria of the market's short-term mood swings to the durable value of real businesses. You see the difference between temporary dislocations and permanent impairments. You see opportunities that are invisible to people whose attention is fully committed to managing today's noise. You begin, in other words, to think like someone who is building something that lasts, not reacting to a world that never stops demanding your compliance. The philosophy in this script is not about passivity. It is not about disengagement from the world. It is not an instruction to stop working hard. It is an argument for working differently, for directing your finite, irreplaceable cognitive resources toward the decisions and the knowledge that actually compound over time, rather than surrendering them to a system that was engineered to consume them. The global corporate machine is extraordinarily well designed. The financial media ecosystem is extraordinarily well funded. The technology platforms competing for your attention employ some of the smartest minds on the planet. They are not your adversaries in any personal sense, but their incentives and your financial interests are, at a structural level, in direct conflict. Understanding that conflict is the beginning of everything. You have a choice. Not an easy choice, but a real one. You can continue participating in the busyness performance, filling your calendar, burning your battery, consuming the noise, making reactive decisions from a position of depletion, and handing the best opportunities to someone sitting quietly in a room somewhere who had the bandwidth to take them. Or you can choose differently. You can decide that your attention is not a commons, that your cognitive bandwidth is the most valuable asset on your personal balance sheet, that the most important financial decision you will make this year isn't which stock to buy. It's how you spend the first hour of every morning, and the last hour of every evening, and the quiet spaces in between. The system wants you exhausted. It is more profitable that way. True wealth, the durable, compounding, generational kind, requires you to be rested, focused, and thinking clearly at the moments that matter most. The quiet room is not a luxury reserved for the already wealthy. It is the prerequisite for becoming wealthy, and you can begin building it today with the time and space and mental energy you already have. The choice is entirely yours. Compound your mind, protect your bandwidth, build the machine, and when the market finally offers you the fat pitch, and it will, you'll be the one standing at the plate with a full swing and a clear eye. That's everything. Thank you for listening.